Welcome back to the session, everybody. Andrew, over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is close to the end of track 2 for the day, and we are going out with a fairly big bang here with Jared Ben from Canva. This session is called Welcome to Design Operations: Simple Steps to Getting Started. If you're looking for supercharging visual workflows in the new reality of content production with Amazon Web Services, then flick over to track 1. Now, during the course of the presentation, I will be monitoring questions and answers. So if you go into the little chat area, to the right-hand side, there's a little speech bubble with a question mark. Make sure you click on that tab. Any questions you might want to have answered by Ben, you can shoot through to me and I'll ask him towards the end. So without much further ado, Jared, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you for chairing today's event as well. It's a big responsibility, obviously, and thanks to Karem and the hardworking team at Henry Stewart pulling a late one tonight. Just sharing screen. Perfect. Well, hello, everybody. I just wanted to take you today through a little design apps starter kit. And I must say that when I sat down to think about how craft and business has evolved since I've been in the workforce, the first thing that came to mind was thinking about a marketing paper that I took while I was in university. The year was 2000. We had just survived Y2K. For those not old enough to remember in the audience, we were really worried about the time that the clocks on our computers wouldn't recognize the year 2000 when it ticked over from 1999. You know, this is real. Forget the GFC. There was real panic that our entire financial system was going to be wiped out because computers at that stage weren't yet capable of handling the number 2. Facebook was years away from being a concept. And for better or worse, the show Big Brother was about to spawn a new era of reality TV that, till today, still refuses to die. And I remember sitting in a class led by a really passionate PhD student who was trying to drill home the theme of the week's lesson into the class. And this lesson was that when positioning a product and market, you can compete on price or quality, but not both. And of course, since then, the technical revolution has flipped this theory on its head with the rapid rise of companies like Uber, Airbnb, Netflix, Amazon, a long list of companies that refuse to accept such rudimentary thinking. And we live in an age where companies must evolve or die. And the businesses that we're designing systems for are no exception. So I'm really glad to be here today, as it's a fascinating time to be part of this evolution. I am Jared. I'm the design ops lead for a team we call Elements at Canva. And our job is to create hundreds of thousands of assets relevant to the tens of millions of active users we have worldwide. And what I love most about this job is many of the things that we're working out for the first time. That means that I, alongside a really passionate design ops team, are constantly challenged to think about the next thing that will separate what we know with what needs to be. Prior to joining Canva, I came from an agency background where we spent years not just partying, but also redesigning the agency workflow for the needs of the modern marketing machine. My longtime boss and mentor that you can see in the top photo there being the model for the day, both grew up in a time where creating campaign assets meant shooting a 30-second commercial and designing a single piece of key art. This, as we all know, has quickly evolved into needing to capture 15 different social clips out of every shoot and making content for every platform imaginable. And during my final years in agency, I was incredibly fortunate to work alongside the brilliant team at Amazon Prime Video, working out a methodology to localize and distribute content for their emerging markets. at real scale. This, of course, is but one of many paths you can take on your journey to starting in a design ops space. For anybody contemplating a shift or has been asked to set up a design ops space in your organization, I'm happy to reassure you that it's likely that many of the things that you're already doing is setting you up with the experience needed to thrive in this space. You know, at the end of the day, we are resource practitioners, which in its simplest form just means that we're connecting a group of stakeholders to perform a series of tasks to get a program of projects delivered. So anything that you're doing that involves project management, digital producing, creative producing, client management, resource management, communications, or culture are all facets of the design ops discipline that you'll apply in different amounts depending on where you land. These backgrounds will certainly arm you with 90% of the skills to get you there, but if I could ask anything, please don't stop there. Like I've already mentioned, the rate of change is faster than it's ever been. And we need to remain mindful that to constantly tailor the principles of what we know to unlock maximum value for our teams. To illustrate this, I've got maybe the most exciting diagram that you've seen all day. Okay, I might have oversold that. This is it's just the TQC triangle. I'm sure most of the people on the call today will be familiar with the theory behind this triangle, but for those who aren't, it's a project management principle that dictates that every project we have three main inputs: time, cost, and quality. And if you want to keep two of the variables constant, the third must change. For example, at Canva, one thing that can never be compromised is quality. We're on an endless search for the highest quality designs that provide the best user experience anywhere in the world. You know, quality is a constant that everything else must revolve. In order to maintain this quality, we know that we must allow our designers and teams the appropriate amount of time to operate. So traditionally, this would leave us with a single variable cost that, according to TCQ principles, must change. For us, however, this should not always be the case. This is the risk of falling into the thought pattern from my marketing lecture that we must compete on price or quality, but not both. And this type of thinking is actually quite limiting for design operations. With design ops separates itself from project management, and I appreciate those of you that have followed the PMBOK course further into the project management. We also have the luxury of working across much larger timeframes. So we can enjoy being able to expand on frameworks such as these. There are so many things that feed into an efficient design ops practice. You know, communications, tooling, the idea of time itself, your organizational structure, hiring, satisfaction and engagement in the workplace, all work together to mold what we see, dispelling the idea that cost alone must simply increase. Don't get me wrong, in the short term perhaps, but that's what we'd call a band-aid solution. You know, over the long term, this is quite limited thinking that will eventuate in your organization hitting its productivity cap quite quickly. What defines good from great is the final 10%, you know, the final 10% that ensures that your thinking is custom fit to the environment that you're working in. You know, a difference that will impact hundreds, if not thousands, of head hours, depending on the size of your organization. So ensuring that systems are custom fit to our environment at Canva often means taking the hard path. This means tests, iterations, and relentless efforts to ensure complacency doesn't set into the approach that we take with our decisions. You know, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the way we operate now. If we were to leave the current processes the way that they were, the way that they have been set up and continue to expand, I'll be the first to say the system would perform beautifully over the next few years. But this type of thinking is something as design ops practitioners we should seldom tolerate. Sure, at this stage of the growth curve, it's true, seasonal KPIs can be achieved by matching increasing goals with an equal increase in headcounts. But along with increasing headcount comes increased organizational complexity. And as you'll very quickly find out, the growth runway doesn't last forever. And if not managed correctly, you'll soon also begin experiencing diminishing returns. If we to simply duplicate our successes in the past, we're missing out on the opportunity to build workflows that will support our team long after the growth curve is flattened. You know, you're going to be the driver in many of these situations. So it's important to arm yourself with the mindset to ensure you're making appropriately informed decisions. Going to sound like an old man now, but before I reached out to Canva, I reached out to, well, before I started at Canva, sorry, I reached out to a long-time thought leader and coach in the space, Josh Silverman, who pointed me in the direction of the book, The First 90 Days. And one of the key takeaways of this book is that your knowledge base coming into a new role can be both your greatest asset and liability at the same time. In his book, Watkins writes, when sticking with what you know, you fail to embrace new concepts and you assume that what made you successful in your previous role will make you successful in your new role. However, sometimes the strengths that are assets in one role can become liabilities in a new one. In other words, on one hand, your background knowledge is likely what got you the job. It'll help you make decisions, and it's expertise that was coveted by your hiring manager. On the other hand, if you rely on this experience alone, the best case scenario you can hope for is recreating something that already exists. And worst case, you'll be building a system that simply doesn't ask enough questions of the environment within which it needs to perform. So you ask, good on you. Okay, what parts of our past experience do we need to apply? You know, how do we separate the good ideas from bad? And for me, the three questions I want to be sure of before committing to any decision making are, firstly, am I aware of my biases? Second, do I understand the organization strategically, operatively, and culturally? And third, what's the most effective way of convincing decision makers with ideas worth pursuing? And before you begin anything, self-reflective places are always the best place to start, in my opinion. Analyzing perspective is something you can do before you even step into the role. I, for instance, learnt my craft as a producer. And so it has become evident to me that a lot of my decision-making has a tendency to skew towards the skills I acquired while my career was developing. You know, I knew my place in the production workflow, and as a result, it's the systems that I implemented early in my career. It's easy to see that they were effectively designed to aid my workflow. You know, I was looking at ways that could make my day-to-day easier. And this is something you should really watch out for when assessing your decision-making and suggestions from the staff. As it turns out, human nature has an innate tendency to create paths for the individual to prosper. Analyzing my biases has helped me understand that it's immensely more valuable to consider the day-to-day of the many other people involved in your workflow to ensure that the collective benefits and not just myself. After you have adequately assessed your biases, the next thing that is essential in any new journey is to take the time to understand the organization or team that you're joining. The strategy, the culture, the micro and macro objectives of those around you are essential to ensuring the impact of your decisions are focused. The photo in the background here is one of us all sitting down to our sacred lunch hour at Canva. Yeah, no doubt a great perk of the job. And trust me when I say I could write an entire presentation on the culinary options at Canva, maybe next year, Andrew. But more importantly, this is the company allowing us all the opportunity to sit next to people that you might not interact with much during your day-to-day. And what a great way to keep the flow of information open. When I first started at Canva, I would spend over 30 hours a week in meetings. And I continue to nearly hit that time because it's essential to understand the context of decision-making in the organization from as many different perspectives as possible. Everyone from the design team, managers, finance, HR, legal, product, engineering, all have valuable input into what's working and what's not from their point of view. As well as meetings, digging around to find strategy documents wherever possible. And if your company utilizes a communications tool like Slack, being able to hit rewind on complex conversations is an incredibly valuable tool. Sometimes you might find the strategy behind some of the decisions aren't relevant anymore, or the decisions were quickly made because they weren't as high on the priority list as they are now. And this is fine too. It's all part of the discovery process that is added to the list of potential improvements that can be implemented in your months ahead. And the third step in this plan is discovering how to convince decision makers of ideas that are worth pursuing. You could have the best ideas, but if you don't get buy-in from the decision makers, your impact is going to be minimized, which isn't a great outcome for yourself or the team. Fortunately for us, differences in leadership are not so subtle and they're easy to spot. For example, in my past role at agency, we had a leader that came solely from a business background. Her focus was on understanding exactly where every dollar we invested was going and how to extract maximum profit from every job. Decisions were made with the finance slides up first, and if I could justify cost versus benefit, solutions were typically approved. In my current role at Canva, it's completely the opposite. The organization has been founded and developed by a designer and philanthropist. Design first is at the core of everything we do. And our focus is almost entirely on extracting maximum quality out of the work we commission, ensuring that everybody that contributes to our platform is compensated fairly, no matter where they are in the world. And there's no right or wrong approach here, just examples of two different businesses at two different stages of their growth curves. The key, however, is to understand what type of environment you're working in, who the decision makers are, and acknowledge the differences in the way you approach conversations from one role to another. Thankfully for me at Canva, our entire organization thrives on innovation. And so the brilliant leaders I report into directly, I'm lucky to have great synergy with. As a result, we're able to push through change and improvements quickly because we can spend our time focusing on the how instead of being buried in endless loops or discussing the what. If I could lean on one more insight before I wrap up, there's a brilliant talk by Paul Wilkins, who is a high performance strategy author and speaker. His talk is called Why the Majority is Always Wrong. I highly suggest you check it out if you get a chance. And in it, he outlines how the boxes within which we think are much smaller than we imagine, and the boxes within which we think professionally are even smaller again. He says that industry standards that we know as truths right now are norms. That is, they are normal. And if you do what everybody else is doing, you're going to get the results that everyone else is getting. Extraordinary results, he says, are only achieved by those who dare to break norms in their industry or field. You know, for us, the rate of change and disruption we're experiencing will only continue to accelerate. So don't forget that the next Uber is coming toward the way we work sooner than you might expect. You know, I hope the 3 steps outlined today helps in some way to get your results committed into action. Design, experiment, iterate, and continue to break down the lessons from the past that aren't relevant to us anymore. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us for the entire day. I hope you enjoy your evenings. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Jared. Very insightful. Appreciate you sharing those things with us today. And thanks for everybody for listening to Creative Operations. It's an inaugural event for 2022. Hopefully we'll get to do this in a little less of a virtual situation and more of a face-to-face next year. Just a reminder that if you've missed a session from today's event, they are accessible in the agenda tab. So you can navigate to the top to the agenda, navigate to one of the sessions you missed, and continue on listening to the great speakers that we've had today. It's also not too late to catch up with the event sponsors in the exhibition tab. So make sure you head over and ask any burning questions you might feel from those vendors. And as I said before, thanks everyone joining us today, to our event sponsors for a great event. And we look forward to seeing you all soon in 2023. Thanks, Jared. Looking forward to catching up face-to-face ourselves in one day soon.
For sure. Thanks, Andrew.
All right now. Cheerio, everybody. Bye-bye.